Welcome, dear readers. You are listening to Time to Read, a Winnipeg Public Library podcast book club. We are recording from various locations around Winnipeg. We would like to acknowledge we are in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Dakota, as well as the birthplace of the Métis Nation and the heart of the Métis homeland. In this episode, we will be discussing Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, which was selected by you, dear readers, in a poll on our Facebook group. I'm Dennis. I normally work at the Idea Mill, and I'm a Beth. Across the screen from me is...
Hi everyone, my name's Kirsten, and I am normally found at the Harvey Smith Library, and I grew up thinking I was a Meg. And across the screen from me is...
Hi everyone, my name's Trevor, and normally you'd find me at the Louis Riel Library, and I'd like to think of myself as a Joe, but I think I'm mostly a Meg. And across the screen from me is...
Hi everyone, I'm Erica. I'm usually at the Fort Garry Library. I thought that I was a cross between Joe and Beth, but one quiz that said I was an Amy, and the other quiz online said that I was a Meg. So there you go. Who knows?
You are all of them.
Apparently.
A good book can carry me away from an average and ordinary day, yeah. So keep it down, leave me alone, close the doors and turn off the phone, 'cause all I ever really need is a little more time to read. And you, dear readers, we couldn't do this without you. We love receiving your questions and comments because they add so much to our discussions. Let us know how you feel about the books we're reading by emailing us at wpl-podcast@winnipeg.ca or leaving a comment on our website, wpl-podcast.winnipeg.ca. Find out if your comments made it on air by subscribing to Time to Read on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, and other fine podcasting services. Be sure to stick around for our special segment, Nerd Words for Word Nerds. Also, we have a special poetry break lined up, too. In a minute, Erica is going to spoil everything by giving us a summary of this month's book. But first, Kirsten will give us a bio of the author.
Yes, I'm grateful that you didn't say a brief bio because, holy moly, once again, such an interesting human being. Louisa May Alcott, born 1832. Her father was transcendentalist and educator Amos Bronson Alcott, and her mother, Abba May, was a social worker, one of the first professional social workers in the United States. Louisa was the second of 4 daughters. Sound familiar? Her father's opinions on education and his tough views on child rearing really helped shape her desire to achieve perfection, which was a goal of the Transcendentalists. Most of her schooling came from her parents, but she also studied under Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Nathaniel Hawthorne, who were all Transcendentalists. Journalist and feminist Margaret Fuller and educator Elizabeth Peabody were also friends of the family because, yes, they were also Transcendentalists. In 1843, Amos, the father, packed up the Alcott family and they began a utopian commune in Harvard, Massachusetts called Fruitlands. They didn't know anything about farming and they refused to use any animals to work the land. They also didn't use any products that had been derived from slave labor. They were vegetarians, but they were vegetarians of a very special type. They ate only vegetables that grew upward, never those like potatoes that grew downward. They had no contact with alcohol or milk. It belonged to cows, after all. They took only cold baths and never warm. Perhaps not surprisingly...
Sounds great.
Perhaps not surprisingly...
Started off well.
Fruitlands failed after about 8 months.
Oh, I wonder why.
It never did take off. A few years later, in 1847, the Alcott family operated as station masters as one of the stops on the Underground Railroad, and they housed a escaping slave during that time for a short period. She first became a published writer at the age of 19 when a women's magazine printed one of her poems. She used the pen name Flora Fairfield during that time. But by age 22, she was starting to use her own name for writing, although you can now find many of her Gothic pulp fiction novels under her other pen name, A.M. Barnard. And these novels were much more focused on spies and revenge, and they were passionate and fiery. And they had titles like A Long Fateful Love Chase and Pauline's Passion and Punishment. And you can actually still find A Long Fateful Love Chase. I think it was actually published after her death. But the protagonists for a lot of these books are actually quite strong. They're smart. They introduced readers to a much more educated and strong female heroine. And she frequently also wrote in her journals about going on long walks and runs. So she certainly challenged a lot of prevailing social norms around gender, and she encouraged her young readers to run as well, which I thought was interesting. You don't hear about a lot of females in the late 1800s running. She was an abolitionist, a feminist. She remained unmarried all of her life. She had an interview where she explained her spinsterhood. That was her words. She said, "I am more than half persuaded that I am a man's soul put by some freak of nature into a woman's body, because I have fallen in love with so many pretty girls, but never once the least bit with any man." She was very steadfast in her desire never to marry. She said, "I'd rather be a free spinster and paddle my own canoe." She died at the age of 55 of a stroke. And that is Louisa May Alcott.
Wow.
Fascinating woman.
I had no idea.
Yeah, me neither.
Especially with all the family connections and stuff to the other big names of the time.
Absolutely.
That actually explains a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this summary actually has no spoilers in it. I don't talk about the plot. I just talk about sort of the ideas in the book. And it was adapted from the back of the edition that I have. Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy are four sisters caught between childhood dreams and the realities of adulthood as they come of age in New England during and after the Civil War. Pastors' daughters, raised in integrity and virtue, but also love and imagination, they negotiate the choices that will either narrow or expand their destinies. Inspired by the author's life, Little Women transcends genre, gender, and class, with its examination of personal quests, societal and religious restrictions, family ties, and the growing pains of becoming an adult.
Nice.
It's general.
Yeah.
It's a high-level summary. I didn't want to get into and then Meg did this, and then Jo did this, and then this happened. Because, I don't know, most people are kind of familiar with the rough framework of the story. So I kind of wanted to give everybody an idea, if they haven't read it, of the sort of themes, rather than the way that they manifest in the plot, if that makes sense.
Have you guys all read this one before, or were you familiar with it before we had it selected in our poll?
I think I read it as a kid. I didn't remember 90% of it, especially all the moral teachings and the long descriptions and the poems and the songs.
Yeah.
I'm if I didn't just super skip over those, I either skimmed them and had no idea what the words meant or what. I had vague memories of different parts of it, but for all intents and purposes, for me, this was a first reading.
I did read it probably when I was about 9 or 10, and it had a large influence on me. Although as I was sort of rereading it, I thought, I don't think I read the second part. I'm fairly sure I just stuck to the first part. And that's probably a good way to go. Read Little Women and leave Good Wives or whatever it's called aside.
Because I thought I was always under the impression that Jo stayed single.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I must not have read the second half either.
I really don't think of that I did. And because I grew up with 3 sisters, so there were 4 of us. So it just had this, and then the book sort of made its way through my family. And, so that's why I said too, growing up, I always saw myself as Meg because I was sort of the eldest, but I also was quite bossy and I, took care of my sisters, or so I thought. And my sister Carrie really embraced the role of Jo. And not that my other sisters were really Beth and Amy, but that's just what they were left with. But there were lots of things in the book that did affect me and influence me. Certainly, like, starting little, like doing performances and that type of thing, and writing and having sort of a secret club or society. Those things definitely did influence me. Mm-hmm.
How about you, Trevor?
Well, I'll tell you this. I never had any interest at all in this book. I think part of it had to do with, like, the title I found super off-putting because, like, I always thought Little Women was kind of like a derogatory term. Like, somebody says, well, how's the little woman, referring to somebody's wife or something. And I just thought, like, it's done. So and also, like, I don't know. I was busy, reading comic books and writing my
Sherlock
Holmes around St. James. Sherlock Holmes took up all my time reading. So I had no interest. I didn't see the 94 version with Susan Sarandon, but I have to tell you that about, 6 months ago, a year ago now, I guess, I saw a trailer for the Greta Gerwig movie when I was in a theater, and I didn't know what it was at first because but from the opening frame of the trailer, I was hooked. I was like, my God, like, every single frame of this looks like a painting. And then, despite the fact it had that guy, Timothée Chalamet, who, I'm not a big fan of that guy. He was in it. But I was like, yeah, I could overlook that, I said to myself. And then when it said Little Women, I was like, well, damn it, now I'm going to have to see Little Women. And I did. And I loved it. I loved it. Yeah. And I have to confess, though, that I've only gotten halfway through the book. Which is called Part 1, but I feel okay about that because originally it was published as Little Women, full stop. And then the second part came out a year later and it was called Good Wives. Yeah. So I can honestly look you guys in the eye and say, I've read Little Women.
Absolutely.
I just haven't read all of Little Women.
Yeah.
But I know how it ends.
It's very much 2 books. It's a very much 2 books.
Oh, for sure.
You can tell a difference in the writing style and in what she's trying to say and everything. So,
I have to admit, I still can't say that I've read it because despite my best intentions,
it's okay.
Some months it's hard to get going. There's this neat feature in Libby where the Libby app, which is what I was using to read this, where if you press on the middle of the page, it'll bring up a little menu, and if you press on the little icon, it'll show you how long you've been reading and how long it will probably take you to read the book.
That's discouraging.
Well, it can work both ways. So when I first looked at it, it said, oh, you've been reading for like 5 minutes, and at this pace, it'll take you 12, 13 hours to read it.
Oh, my God.
But then it will also show you, based on when you started reading it, so how frequently you're reading, how long it will take. And because I had picked it up and been reading in dribs and drabs, it said, at this pace, you will finish in another 2 years.
Oh, my God. No!
And that was a little discouraging.
That is super discouraging.
I did watch the 1994 film version with Winona Ryder and Susan Sarandon, so all of my insights will come from there and the little bits that I've managed to read about the book, but yeah.
That's acceptable.
Yes.
We've always said you don't have to finish the book to participate in a book club.
Yeah.
We've always said that.
Yeah.
Because and people should read what they want.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even have to start it either. You can just join in.
And
it's not because I wasn't enjoying the little bits that I read. It's just life gets in the way sometimes.
Absolutely.
So,
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Totally.
But also this one, like, as soon as I started it, I'm like, this is really preachy. I was like, oh, they're going to be so perfect and stuff like this. And like, it was a chunk of pages in before I was like, okay, that's not how this is going to continue being. But I had to get over that initial, like, I don't remember it being this pious. I'm like, but...
I skipped over a bunch of the the songs or the poems or some of those things too, just to get to the story. But then I do remember a lot of the parts of the story. But I have to say, once I started doing some research about Louisa May Alcott and I started finding out more and more about her, I actually was then reading the book with a much different frame of mind as well, because I really did see Jo as Louisa May Alcott. And Louisa May Alcott did not want to write this book. She needed to write this book. Her publisher told her she should to make money for the family because her father just really didn't have the best ideas on how to support the family. So a lot of her story really does come through this story. And I don't think I really realized that. I mean, everything I've since read, everyone seems to know that it is quite biographical. But I didn't realize that. And then just the whole, how strong her own mother was, Louisa May's mother. And the fact that, some of the stuff that I read, her own mother really felt not happy with her husband's inability to sort of contribute to the family. And I think she pass that down to her daughters. And I think Louisa May, actually, one of her sisters did die as well So there's so much. Yeah.
It's fictionalized in some ways. How I ended up taking a lot of pleasure reading it was to read it as like aspirational rather than like all these perfect people trying to be perfect and all the women should always be perfect and be blamed for everything all the time. But yeah, I read it as aspirational, like a hero story. Like, these are remarkable people who did remarkable things, even though it was sort of in a quiet, just living their lives kind of way, as like role models rather than preaching everybody should be like this or you're bad. So I actually found it very inspiring. Jo and Laurie made the story for me.
Yeah.
All of the pranks and the way they swatted each other and were ridiculous together.
Yeah.
Those were the most captivating parts.
Yeah, I have to say Laurie was much more charming and likable in the novel than in the Greta Gerwig movie, I thought. I thought that, he was this kind of, like a tease and a prankster, but you could really tell there was such a close, strong bond between Laurie and Jo that was just pure friendship and love, but not maybe romantic love, but a different kind of just a strong bond that was just lovely to see and watch this friendship go through all of its ups and downs, for sure.
Yeah. And I think, that just her presenting this story about women and their relationships and their dreams and their aspirations and their skills and their relationships, and have it be so focused on women, I don't think that happened very much back in the 1860s. I think it was written in 68. But she definitely didn't want to write. She didn't want Jo to get married.
Yeah, and you can really feel that in the story, too. Like, when I was watching the movie version of it and she marries the professor or agrees to marry the professor, and it's like, really? I didn't see that for her character. It just felt like, no, this is a woman who is going to stand on her own as long as she can. And the way that happened was just kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah, because she felt it was weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to keep gushing about the Greta Gerwig movie, but this is a bit spoilery for the ending. But what I love about that movie is that there's many scenes between her and Mr. Dashwood, her publisher, where he's always giving her advice like, everyone has to be married if they're female by the end. And she's like, well, that's dumb. And so he said, I'll publish this, but the main character has to get married. And she's all like, okay. Because she's writing, the plot device for the movie is that Jo is writing Little Women. So it kind of like conflates the novel with her telling the story. And so she writes a scene where Jo does marry the professor, and it's all super schmaltzy, and there's a scene where they're under the umbrella and the music swells. It's just your typical Hollywood ridiculousness. And then she says, like, fine, like, here's your stupid ending. And then what I love about the movie is that it's not explicit in the movie that she actually marries the professor. At the end, they show her running the school, spoilers, and the professor's there, but it never actually explicitly shows a wedding scene or anything. thing. And I just thought, wow, that's awesome. That Joe, maybe Greta Gerwig has given the story, the ending that Louisa May Alcott wanted to give it, but 150 years later. So yeah, I can't say, if we just do a separate podcast on Greta Gerwig's Little Women, I've got lots of thoughts, but I'm not going to say more.
Well, I won't say
too much else.
I read that Greta Gerwig said that growing up, she was inspired by Joe. Like as a young girl, she was inspired by Joe. As a woman, she's been inspired by Louisa May Alcott. So that ending kind of does make sense when you think about that she's really sort of bringing that together. Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of this conversation also kind of leads to one of the questions that we asked on our social media. Do you think Little Women is a feminist piece of work?
Yeah, I know that one of
for its time. Let's qualify by saying yes for its time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not that it's perfect in that regard, but pretty remarkable for that. Yeah, 1860s.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I got all caught up in this question because I was thinking, well, then what actually makes a piece of art or literature feminist? Or do we just apply a feminist filter to certain pieces of art and see? So that's what I tried to do. Yes, there's strong female characters. The male characters are almost secondary, and the father is pretty ineffective in it. And then I thought back to when we did Fun Home and the Bechdel test. So I thought, does this book pass the Bechdel test? I had to refresh my memory what the Bechdel test was. And it was, are there at least two characters who are women who have names? So yes. And they have a conversation with each other. Yes.
Oh, yes.
About something other than men. Well, yes, the whole book is just them talking about their hopes and dreams and stuff. So yeah, this thing not only passes the Bechdel test, it passes it with flying colors. So I don't know if that's how you should judge whether a thing's feminist or not, but it does pass that. So that's all I know.
I think that was like a bare minimum kind of thing.
It's one criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, exactly.
Well, and I mean, I think, the more that I read about Louisa May Alcott's upbringing and her own strong mother, and then these these family friends who were feminists, I think it couldn't help but sort of have that come through the book. But yeah, it's more for its time because throughout it still talks about, your end result is still to get married or, to be.
And then your duty is to your husband and not to your own. And your duty is to your children and your duty is to honoring your parents.
Yes.
And it's like, blah, blah, blah,
and
blah,
your
blah, blah.
father and the, the poor boys in the war and, that kind of thing. So actually Louisa May Alcott also worked as a nurse at the beginning of the U.S. Civil War. So, yeah.
Yeah. But there was also, of course, lots of commentary on how things are different for men and for women and just pointing out the biases of society and how, boys are treated differently than girls and stuff like that. So.
And I found it interesting too, Kirsten, when you were reading the biography about her friendships with famous sort of thinkers of the day like Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. And then it made me think, well, then if she was forced to marry off Joe in the book, she chose kind of like an older professor type. And I thought, well, that kind of checks out then, because if she knows people like Thoreau and Emerson, she probably admired them to a certain extent and learned from them and thought, if I had to marry somebody, I would maybe marry Emerson or a Thoreau type. And so it kind of all kind of made sense in my head just listening to you give it the bio.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this was such a popular book, while she was alive. It was very, 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 very popular. And the ending of book part 1 is that Joe refuses Laurie. And the readers were just outraged about that. And they were just writing her and visiting her and Louisa May Alcott to say, please, they need to get married. They should get back together. And I think that, I also read something about how Louisa May Alcott actually pretended to be a servant in her own house because there were so many people coming to the door, wanting to talk to her about this ending. So, I mean, I do think it's interesting, especially if we are talking about some of the things that it does raise for the time, it being quite unique and unusual, and it being so popular.
I wonder if those were the same irate fans that were writing to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle about him killing off Sherlock Holmes and forcing him to bring him back too. Yeah, it's roughly the same era. They're probably
like every day. They sat down and they wrote one letter to Alcott and one letter to Conan Doyle.
It worked.
Yeah.
And you'd think,
Public
like,
pressure.
today authors have to deal with people on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that, but they at least usually don't have people knocking on their door and saying, hey, I got to talk to you about this character. Or maybe they still do. I don't know.
Maybe they do. Who's to say?
I know Stephen King has talked about sometimes, like, he has a gate on his house, and part of the reason why is, people will just come right up.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so let's go to another question that we had asked. Have you ever been in a secret society like the March Sisters Pickwick Club? And if so, can you talk about it?
You mean other than our Facebook group?
Yeah.
Shh.
Our not-so-secret society.
Yeah. Inspired by this book and being the Meg character, I was like, okay, we're going to start a secret society. Let's go, sisters. And I think I've even talked about this in terms of like with reading The Secret Seven or Harriet the Spy. Like I really, really wanted to have sort of a group that then, had a clubhouse and collected dues and ate ginger toffee or whatever it was, ginger beer or ginger tea. I don't know what it was, something gingery. But inspired by Little Women, though, then I also, I wanted then to gather my sisters and then have us put on also these extravagant theater productions and musical productions. We did this whole kind of choreographed dance, and none of us actually even took dance. But anyway, we did this choreographed dance to, da 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 da, the Beethoven, but the disco version. It starts off Beethoven and then it turns disco. Anyway, that was the surprise to the delight of the adults in our life. So I don't know if it was really secret or
there's no video footage of this, unfortunately.
No. Yeah. No video footage from that. Although there is this, we have this great photograph of a friend of ours. He had taken a picture of me and I'm whispering into my sister Heidi's ear because she's about to go onto stage because she is the poor man in Good King Wenceslas. So I'm giving her stage direction and Hannah-Laura is up above kind of listening in as well. So that just sort of captures the Meg, persona that I was giving the stage direction and okay, go.
That's awesome.
That's adorable.
I sort of have a secret society story. I'm just a little afraid sharing it because, of course, secret society should be secret. But I can tell this. When I was in junior high, there was this guy that was like a grade older than me. And I kind of knew him through church and he was moving away. So he said, do you want a job that pays $5? I think it was $5 a month. And at that time, I was like, yeah, okay, because I could use $5 a month. And what it was, there's this organization called the Eastern Star. And I think they're like an offshoot of the Masons. I never really figured out, but I think it was like for women. I think they're like Lady Masons, but I'm not 100% sure.
Order of Eastern Star.
Right.
Is that the Joe's Daughters thing too? Yeah.
I don't know. But they met at this local church, not our own church, but a different church. And the thing is all of their paraphernalia was kept in the basement. But they like to have their meetings up on the upper hall. So they would hire a young person, myself, or the guy in a grade ahead of me, to go every month early to open the closet, take out all the paraphernalia, and set it up in a particular way.
Oh my God.
But I wasn't supposed to look at it. But I did notice that there was like a pentagram on the ground, and then there was like symbolism of like wheat, or like there's a crown and sword, like all this kind of Masonic stuff that I had to set up. And then these older ladies arrived and would pay me $5 cash in an envelope, and then I had to leave. I couldn't stay for the meetings. And then I'm not sure how the stuff all got put away at the end, but I guess maybe they did because they were all there. But it was very important that the whole room was set up exactly this way every time. And I did this without really thinking too much about it for about a year. until the Eastern Star ladies had a cabinet built on the upper floor. And so then they didn't need me to carry the stuff up the stairs anymore. The cabinet was in the same room. And then I got sort of made redundant by a new cabinet. But yeah, so I mean, again, I'm just, I don't know what was going on there, but that was my close brush with a secret society. And I didn't like it.
Whoa. No.
I didn't like it. So the Eastern Star...
I don't know. It sounds like you came out ahead and financially on it.
Yeah, it's true. I did,
The Eastern Star is usually Venus, if that helps. It's named after the star that you see right after the sun goes down.
Okay.
Or comes up. So that's
I can only hope
Venus.
that it's sort of like a group that, does charity work and, in the community. Like, I imagine...
They're not evil, don't worry.
No, the pentagram put me off a bit, but I imagine that, a five-pointed star, it does not necessarily mean witchcraft.
Nope.
No. I've got a coworker who is a member of Eastern Star. It's a fine charitable organization.
Oh, okay, great.
Sinister at all.
Because I'm afraid that this may be my last podcast if the word says that I've been spilling Eastern Star secrets. Yeah. Well, it's been nice knowing you guys.
How long did you keep that secret, though? How long did you keep that secret, would you say?
Well, since the first time I told this story, about 30 years.
So that's long enough.
Yeah. I'm sure all the ladies that were in it then are probably dead.
If they come back for you, it's a whole other thing to worry about.
Oh, my God.
Unfortunately for me, I was never part of a secret society, even though I always wanted to be. But I wasn't aware of any around me, probably because they were really secret. And, I would have liked that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would have been fun to have, secret handshakes and all that. I never thought to take the initiative and make one myself like you did, Kirsten. I was
Meg,
good.
I tell you, bossy. Well, this is how we always saw Meg, was that she was this bossy person that told everyone what to do. But maybe that's just because that's what how my sisters saw it because of me.
So Little Women was published in 1868 and is still beloved today. What do you think makes a book a classic?
When it talks about things that don't really change. Like kids are kids, especially when she was describing the grandbabies and stuff at the end, and they're 3 years old and they're being ridiculous. Kids will be kids, and, girls are girls most of the time in kind of a generalized way. And, people are always just trying their best to look after their loved ones and themselves and not be terrible people and, think about the world and their place in it. So when you write something maybe that's so true to your own life, it can't help but be generalizable. Is that a word?
Yeah.
To other people's lives.
So universalism is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, the fact that there were, these 4 women, well, really more than that, but the 4 sisters, and they all were such different characters. So there were a lot of different personalities that many of us could relate to. And I think that maybe the whole relatable thing is also, like you said. At O Never Morio from Instagram commented on most of our questions, actually. And she had this to say about what makes a classic. She said, I think there are lots of ingredients to make a classic, but I think one of the most important things is an ensemble of characters, or at least protagonists, that is fully realized with an arc that the reader can get behind or at least care about. And I mean, I guess, the fact, over the ages too, Well, and the fact that it's, then it's just been made and adapted into so many different things. Like I read that there was a 48 episode anime series about Little Women, It just in all sorts of different ways.
I've watched a few of those. They're really weird because they introduce a whole bunch of new characters and these subplots but then eventually it does get to the plot of the novel, but that takes up to, that doesn't start till episode 18 or so. There's 17 episodes of this weird backstory. It's really trippy. It's available on Hoopla, actually.
There
if anyone's interested in burning one of their boros on that. And with classics, I always think, too, that there's something about if it stands the test of time, that if it still has something relevant and interesting to say to different generations, then that also kind of makes it a classic. And so a term that I don't like is something, whenever someone calls something an instant classic. Because to me, that's like an oxymoron. That's like almost as bad as unputdownable, the way that bugs Erica. So, yeah, instant classic. So something that's been around, so that's sort of what I think about it. It's sort of, after 100 years or so, I don't know, any given time, if something is still being talked about or people are enjoying, that's what I got.
Another question we asked was related to Beth. So Beth longed to learn music. If money and time weren't an object and you could take lessons or classes in anything, what would you learn and why?
Well, we had lots of responses for that on our social media, and it seems like lots of people would like to perhaps take up a musical instrument. So Amanda Rogo said the cello, hands down. And Jennifer Allard, 73, said the violin. It's always seemed so beautiful to me. Beautiful once you've actually learned how to play the violin, but I've heard so many people when they're just first learning, it's not the most beautiful sound.
I've got a good violin story. When I was in high school, we put on a play, and I played the part of Henny Oldman. It was a riff on the comedian Henny Youngman.
Clever.
And the character carried around a violin, and after making a joke, would saw away on the violin in a most unmusical way. And I was having a lot of fun with that. But as I kept doing this, because I was goofing around, suddenly the actual owner of the violin was like, you should probably stop because you're getting better and you don't want to get better.
That's awesome.
Ooh, there might be some natural talent that you have.
No, probably dumb luck, but, they wanted it to be very rough
Very
sounding.
rough, yeah.
I already play a couple of instruments, but I would want to learn more instruments. If I didn't have to worry about time or money, I would be playing instruments, doing better at composing and producing. I'd want to draw and make animations, and like the question we left it really broad, but if there was no limit on time and money, I would just keep learning things because it's so much fun.
Hear, hear.
I'd want to learn carpentry and sewing, and I would want to write like Joe. Like I've always wanted to write, but I've never had the patience for it. But give me enough time, maybe.
You need a writing smock. That'll do it for you. If you had a smock like hers,
smock?
Yeah. If you had a smock like she wore for cleaning her pens as she's writing, like that's going to be the. You need the right accoutrement, and then you'll be good to go.
I knew I was missing something, and it was right there in this
the
book.
Smock.
Yeah. Or whatever she called it.
No, I like it, yeah.
Well, one of the sort of sobering things about the whole being pandemic and things is that people, at the beginning of it, thought, we have all this time, we're going to learn new things or do things, but if people are like me, here we are, starting to come out of it, and I haven't really, this is what I've done. Like a weird dad, I downloaded a flight simulator to my computer because I wanted to teach myself how to fly an airplane.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, that sounds like a great idea, but I got the demo. I can't get that thing off the ground. I keep crashing the Cessna on the runway. Like I've died dozens of times.
That's right. You practice on the simulator first.
Yeah,
that's why you have a simulator, and they don't just give you an airplane.
There's a spot where you can cheat and you can just jump to where you're already in the air. And I'm getting good with that. Like I can fly it when it's already up there, but I can't take off and I can't land. So I think I need to master those two things before I really get into a cockpit. So.
Wow.
Those are the most challenging parts of flying. In a similar vein, there's a game out there called Kerbal Space Program where you try to design and launch rockets. And apparently it does a really good job of simulating a lot of the issues with orbital mechanics and spaceship design and stuff like that. So, if you want to step up once you learn how to land and take off, then you can start working on your astronaut skills.
Oh, man. Just wait.
That'd be awesome. There's a wonderful line in The West Wing that I think of and I quote all the time, where President Bartlett, played by Martin Sheen, is saying, "I would have made a good astronaut." And his wife, played by Carol Channing, says, "You're afraid of enclosed spaces, heights, and fire." And he says, "Yeah, but I would have been good." Something like that. Like, yeah.
We just ignore that other stuff and it's fine.
Scout a Boot said on Instagram that I would learn Swedish so I could converse with my niece and nephew in their mother's tongue. And I think I agree with Scout a Boot. I think I would, want to learn a few more languages, like maybe get my French up to par, and maybe learn Spanish. And
you would get your French up to parlez-vous?
Very good. Very, very good.
French puns.
And Winnie City said, I really want to learn to knit, a good way to keep my hands busy. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people have taken up some of those types of skills during this pandemic.
So before we move on, does anyone have anything else they wanted to say about this book or the story or anything related to it?
You know, one thing I liked, and I thought, and I didn't notice this obviously the first time I read it when I was 9 or whatever, but when Marmee and Joe have that conversation about anger issues, and Marmee says, "I've been angry almost every day of my life," because Joe's having a really hard time sort of controlling her outbursts, and I just thought that was interesting, and sort of then the advice that Marmee gives, maybe I don't necessarily agree with, but I did like that they were talking about anger and that we have anger and it's okay, and then checking in, how are you doing with that? Or noticing, like, good job, I noticed you sort of, have been doing other things, coping skills to deal with your anger. I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was really neat. Like, they all acknowledged each other's faults, but, like, they accepted them. Mm-hmm. They accepted each other's faults, but at the same time saying, but, you really need to get that under control because it's going to take over your life otherwise. Yeah. And then they would notice steps being taken. Yeah. And they would say, you're doing great with that, or I noticed that you put that effort in, and that was, that was really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just thinking about that scene between Marmee and Joe, it was remarkable when I read that too, because I remember that scene in the Greta Gerwig movie, and I just thought, what a great, real, modern feeling scene that was. And I thought when I saw the movie, this is just her take on it. And then when I actually read those very words, like, I'm angry almost every day, I could just hear Laura Dern saying those words in the movie, and I was impressed with how many lines of dialogue and things were lifted actually right from the novel and put in the screenplay, and it just made me love that movie even more.
Well, and that did make me think of Louisa May Alcott's real mother, because I think she was also angry every single day as well, because I think she was quite frustrated with her, the relationship and her lot in life. And because obviously she was a very educated, smart, capable woman who was doing already lots of amazing things for that time period. Interesting. Women in anger. Very interesting.
I know. Some things don't change.
Well, yeah. And, and that's why I said I didn't totally agree with Marmee's take on it, because, I think that it's also okay to embrace some of that anger and accept it and work with it.
Before we move on to our book recommendations, I think it's time for our special poetry break, which this episode is by Winnipeg's own poet laureate, Duncan Mercredi.
My name is Duncan Mercredi. I was born in Mississipaugastic Cree Nation, which is also known as Grand Rapids, Manitoba. And let me just share a couple of pieces I've written the last couple of weeks. And the first one is titled, "We All Look at Life with Different Eyes." We all look at life with different eyes. We see what we want to see. Even the colors we use are not the same. The canvas we paint on fits only the narrative we want to hear. We all look at life with different eyes. We see what we have been taught to see. It's all captured within that little space of time on the canvas. It's dark. It's dangerous. that little space has no color. We all look at life with different eyes. And the second piece I'm going to be doing is, I wrote this when I was listening to the radio, not the radio, but the television, and they were talking to a nurse in critical care in the States, and after she talked, I remembered a picture of my niece who works at the Health Sciences Center, and the picture she sent, she was all wearing her mask and the whole thing that you have to wear for protection. What caught me was her eyes. There was a lot of sadness in her eyes mixed in with fear, and that's when this piece came to me, and it's called "We Do What We Need to Do." We do what we need to do. We hold hands. We hold hope. We let them rest on us. We count the seconds that become minutes, that become hours, that become days. We do what we need to do. We close our minds. We ignore the tears. We carry the pain inside. We count the bodies. We count the empty beds, few and far between. We wait for the siren. We struggle to our feet. Sometimes we pray, even when they're not heard. The words comfort us. And when the sun comes up, later every day it seems, we remove our feeble armor, hold our feelings inside. We ride home in silence, scared to close our eyes. Nightmares shouldn't enter when the sun is shining, but they do. We enter a quiet room, lower the shade to make believe it's dark, and only then do we lower our heads and cry.
And now we come to our most awkwardly worded segment. Can you tell me a book I would also like? Who would like to start with book recommendations?
Me?
You go, Erica.
I'm going to go. I would like to recommend to you Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I somehow end up talking about this book a lot, but it is one of my favorites. Similar to the March sisters, the Mrs. Dashwood were well off early in their lives, but now must learn to live on very little in a much smaller house. They try very hard to be good, but their emotions sometimes get the better of them. They also think and talk about the world, their own life choices. They also think about the world, their own life choices, and comment on how different societal expectations and possibilities are for men than women. It was published in the early 1800s, so I feel like it may have had an influence on certain parts of the book of Little Women.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you aren't familiar already with Sense and Sensibility, please go out and take a look. It's a wonderful book.
Now, just following up on Erica, who chose a book that may have inspired Louisa May Alcott, my book choice is something that I'm sure was inspired by Louisa May Alcott. My pick is, of course, Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. It's published in 1908. I don't know if I even need to do a plot summary, but just quickly, Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert are brother and sister. They're getting on in years, and they run a farm, and they decide that they would need help at the farm, so they see if they could get a boy from the orphanage to come and help. But, you know, it was a screw-up, and it was a girl, Anne Shirley, and who comes instead. And before she's sent back to the orphanage, she wins everyone over. It's such a beautiful lyrical story. It's full of descriptions of the natural world, full of lush sort of sensory detail. I'm kind of a new convert to the story. I read it maybe 5 or 6 years ago and just fell in love with it and the entire series. There's so many little parallels between it and Little Women. Just one example is when Jo gets her hair cut off, she calls, or to sell, she says it was her one true beauty. And the reverse of that with Anne, she talks about her red hair being her lifelong sorrow. So if you haven't read Anne of Green Gables, please check it out. And if you have, read it again. It's even better on the reread. That's my book recommendation.
Both those stories rely a lot on the kindred spirits kind of theme.
Yes.
Finding your kindred spirits in your family that way. Yeah.
On a similar vein, I guess I'll suggest if you enjoyed the close relationships of the March sisters and the historical setting, you might also enjoy Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. George and Lenny are migrant workers in California during the Great Depression, barely getting by, with dreams of someday owning an acre of land and a shack to call their own. They get a job on a ranch, and it seems that they're on the right trajectory. But like the Robert Burns poem says, the best laid schemes of mice and men gang after gley. Of the books we had to read for English class back in high school, this was easily my favorite. The friendship between George and Lenny is beautiful, and the backdrop of the Great Depression adds a lot of color. It's a novella, so it's a fairly quick read, and the 1992 film adaptation with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich is extremely well done. But fair warning, the book is a tragedy and has a very sad ending. I'm a soft touch, and I teared up just thinking about the ending, even though I hadn't read it in many years now. It's a heartbreaker. So if you're not ready for a good cry, save this one for another time. But if you're looking for emotional connection and some catharsis, it really delivers.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Nice.
Yeah. My recommendation is actually a more recent book. And because Little Women was really one that I related to as a sister with my sisters. So my book recommendation also highlights sort of the strong sister bonds, the sister influences, the love that you have for your sister. And it is We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves by Karen Fowler. It is about Rosemary Cook, and she is the narrator. She is the daughter of a behavioral psychology professor. So lots of attention has been paid to her and her family by her father and grad students about developmental milestones. She grows up with an older brother who runs away and with a sister, Fern, who seems to Rosemary to have abruptly just disappeared from her life when she was around 5 years old. And this loss is profound. This loss of her sister, her best friend, is profound. This loss of her sister affects her for the rest of her life, and she sort of is constantly then seeking out what happened to Fern. Rosemary is a wonderful, witty storyteller, and it's a really great book. And I would recommend We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves by Karen Fowler.
Oh,
nice. So now it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Nerd Words for Word Nerds, the part of each show where our hosts boil down their most prevalent thoughts of the past month into one word or phrase or whatever. Who would like to start here? Erica?
I do want to go first because mine's ridiculous. So it's Hasha Fashasha. I don't know if you've seen this. Courtesy of a meme.
You're going to have to repeat that.
I will. It's courtesy of a meme that made me laugh out loud on and off for several days every time I thought of it. It was going around a little while ago. And it's from a tweet from @RallyCrossRS. Do y'all blow on food when it's hot, or do you hasha fashasha until you can chew it? So I feel this is self-explanatory and onomatopoetic, but if you need a definition and source, it can be found on Urban Dictionary as hasha fashasha, the action of rolling hot food in your mouth until it's cool enough to chew, derived from the sound one makes while performing this action. So, yeah, I've been thinking a lot lately every time I chew anything about hasha fashasha.
Nice. I like it.
Great. My nerd word this week is also food related, so maybe I could go next. My word was inspired from Little Women, the scene where Amy is at school and she gets punished and sent home. And the reason she's punished is she has pickled limes with her that not only does she have for her own enjoyment, but she's been trading them. And I was like, pickled limes? What the heck? So I looked them up. Apparently in the 1880s, especially in New England, people would go nuts for them. You could buy them in glass jars in candy stores. Some families bought entire barrels of them. That's sort of like the precursor to Costco, I guess. They were neither classified as fruit nor pickle, so they were cheap to import, which meant they cost as little as a penny each. And they came in from outside the country. Nowadays, you would think of limes and lemons coming from Florida, but that industry didn't really get started until after the time of Little Women. There's a quotation from a doctor in Boston in 1869 who declared pickled limes were among the unnatural and abominable substances consumed by children. And it was also a real distraction because they were kind of sharing them in class and stuff. And so they're kind of like an old-timey fidget spinner. And apparently what they did is they pickled the whole thing completely in their skin and everything. They would just cut some slits in them, drop them in salt and then vinegar, and then like after a very long time, weeks, they were ready to eat. So pickled limes.
Weird.
Yeah.
Nice.
That whole part with the school bartering system and the like power dynamic was hilarious between Amy and the other girls. That was hilarious.
So my nerd word for this episode is inconsequential. Defined as not important or significant, synonyms include incidental, insignificant, and trivial. Inconsequential is one of those words that's been stuck in my head for many, many years, partly due to the meaning and partly because I love the sound and feel of the word. I've always been a sucker for a good polysyllabic word with multiple K sounds. The character Beth, towards the end of her life, talks to Jo about how she never imagined a future for herself beyond being at home, never expected to be anyone important, never expected marriage or the other things that her sisters dreamed of. The world was a bit too much, and she often felt overwhelmed by it, and she expected and seemed to prefer an inconsequential life. This really resonated for me because that's more or less how I've often thought about my own life. While other people dream of stardom, fame, accomplishments, travel, wealth, big families, etc., I've never really had any vision about my own life and never particularly wanted anything from it aside from quiet contentment. There's a saying I heard many years ago related to low-impact hiking and camping. Take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints. And I've always thought if I could exit this world without leaving a trace behind me, I would be content with that. I've never really wanted to make my mark. But life is complicated and interconnected web, and it's actually really hard to be completely inconsequential, even if you want to be. Beth's short life and tragic death was deeply impactful for her family, and my life, despite my best intentions, touches a number of other lives in various ways, some of them deeply significant. So as much as I would like to be completely inconsequential, I don't know if anyone really can be. We all have consequence within us, for better or worse. Inconsequential.
Oh, we love you.
I'm very glad you are not inconsequential, Dennis.
Yeah, really.
Well, it's still a goal of mine, but it just,
I think you should forget that goal.
Well, yeah, you're not trying hard enough.
You have a podcast now, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so my nerd word is interrobang. Lately, the last little while, we've been doing a lot of our communication with each other over email, text, and it's really hard to sort of establish kind of the tone or excitement or worry or that kind of thing when you're just communicating through email. And then especially because we're planning on reopening soon, very gradually. And so we're excited about that, but we also have lots of questions about it. So I have a solution for you. It is called the interrobang, and it is a combination of the question mark and the exclamation mark. You put them together, one on top of the other, and it's called interrobang. So it asks a question in an excited manner, expressing excitement or disbelief, or asking a rhetorical question. And I think that the interrobang really kind of, epitomizes my feelings these days. Excited, disbelief, perhaps. So the interrobang was created in 1960s by, of course, an advertiser named Martin Spector. Other possible names that they were considering was exclamaquest or quizding or the exclarative. But they came up with the interrobang because the interrogatio is Latin for rhetorical question or cross-examination. And bang is printer's slang for the exclamation mark. It was very much in vogue in the 1960s, but it has not disappeared. You can actually still find the interrobang under the Lucinda Grand font. And the State Library of New South Wales in Australia uses it as its logo. So, interrobang is my nerd word today.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have this month. Thank you so much, dear readers, for joining us. Since June is Pride Month, we've decided to read Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin. It's available on Overdrive, so you can read it and listen to our discussion when that episode drops on the first Friday in July. Keep an eye out on our social media. We post questions a week or so before we record, and we want to get your opinions so we can talk about them. Get in on the conversation by finding us on Facebook or emailing us at wpl-podcast@winnipeg.ca. Have a book you'd love to hear us discuss? Let us know. We'd love it if you hit subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast service. We'd love it even more if you were to give us a rate and review. Tell your book-loving friends about us, too. And by the way, if you haven't checked out Winnipeg Public Library's YouTube channel in a while, you might want to take a look. Our colleagues have been busy uploading a range of new and interesting videos, including some book recommendations, gardening videos, stories, and more. And until next time, make sure you find time to read. We lost Kirsten. Should we wait till she gets back?
I don't know.
Well, I guess I could do mine, and then if she hasn't come back by then, we'll try to get in touch with her.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I don't know. Is she sending any messages to anybody?
Oh, she lost internet access.
I think it's gold again, she said. I guess maybe good again?
Or gone again?
Or who knows?
You guys finished? It's really bad internet connection.